Now then, welcome back to another video. Okay, so we're back on the CBR. It's been so while since I did a video. Since my last one, I took the bike for its MOT and it passed. Can get in. However, I am still having some issues. It seems to be sometimes flooding on a few cylinders, and actually at one point it hydrolocked, which is, if you don't know what it is, it's where the cylinder fills up with fuel and it stops the piston from being able to move, so it basically acts like a seized engine. And that happened on cylinder 3 at one time and cylinder 4, and I cleared it by taking the spark plug, turning the start motor over, and you can see fuel being shot out. So there's obviously an issue there. There's too much fuel getting into the cylinders. I changed the float needles on a previous video in the carburetors, but what I didn't do is check the float needle valve seats in the carburetors, because I suspect that even though the needles are brand new now, they're still not sealing. So it's always letting fuel through, no matter how high the float is, and it's not stopping off fuel flow like it should. So I'm gonna take the carburetors off again, and then I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna pressure test it, just to make sure that the float needles are seating, which I suspect they're not. So let's go. Okay, so I'm just in the process of removing the carburetors, and just to further prove I have got a flooding issue, I thought I'd show this. So I've got the fourth carburetor here, so I'm just going to lift the slide up here. Hopefully you can see it. You probably can see it from the shimmering, hopefully. See that? So the butterfly valve on the carburetor there is actually closed at the moment. You can see there's fuel collecting already. So obviously there's something going wrong here. Too much fuel is getting into the cylinder. So I'll continue moving the carburetors, but I suspect the float valve needle is not seating properly, and it's not stopping fuel flow. Okay. Other ones look okay. That one looks a bit wet as well. Okay. Okay guys, carburetors have been removed, and to further confirm an issue with the flooding and the float needle valves in the carburetors, cylinders 3 and 4 have got fuel in them. 4 really bad. But, if I tried to start this bike like this, I definitely would have hydrolocked again, you know, potentially caused engine damage. So what I'm going to do now is take out the 2 spark plugs on this side, crank over the engine, and then what should happen is, as these valves open up, the fuel will go in and it'll just get squirted out of the bike. So I don't want to just have this sat here like this with fuel just sat there in the cylinders. Okay. Okay guys, so taking out the spark plugs, so now I'm just going to crank the engine over, and it's going to release all the fuel that's stuck in that cylinder. So play yourself a bit of action. Oh, right in the face. Okay, that should do it. Okay, so I've got the carburetors off the bike, and I've removed the float ball caps here. So what I'm suspecting is the issue here is underneath the float here, you've got the float needle that I've replaced previously, and when the fuel's at the correct level, that float should lift up and it should close off that fuel passageway on each one. So what I suspect is happening to cylinders 3 and 4, which is causing the flooding that we saw in the previous video, is, I think this is, yeah, so this is 3 and 4. So I don't think the float needles are sealing. Like I said, I've placed the float needles, but I haven't looked at the actual needle seat. So I've got a bit of a test rig set up here to pressure test it. So I've got this up to my air compressor. I've got it turned all the way down, so you can deliver about 5 psi, right on the minimum what this can do. And what we'll do is press the trigger here, and I'm listening for a noise of air releasing. So there we go. I don't know if you can pick that up, but I can hear a faint hiss. So from what I've researched, 5 psi, these should be able to hold 5 psi. Okay. So what I'm going to do next, so I can see the float valve needle and seat better, I'm going to remove the floats, and then I'm going to spray some fluid in the area and see if I can look for bubbles to help me determine which one is leaking. But obviously I suspect that these two are at fault based on what we saw earlier with the flooding cylinders. Okay, so what I've done, I've got some soapy water and I've placed it on where the valve needle and seat are, and now I'm going to press the air compressor. I'll put 5 psi through it. So as we heard a hiss earlier, we should be seeing bubbles on some of the carburetors. So let's give that a crack. Yeah. Okay. So it seems to me that they're not seeing it very well. This one was very noticeable, and as we saw earlier, that is cylinder number 4. So that's the one that was flooding quite a lot in the previous video. So what I'm going to do now is remove the floats, remove the float needles, and then I'm going to try and polish and clean the valve seats on each of these. Even then, even though I don't think there's a problem with them too, I'm still going to do them too, and see if I can get any potential debris, contaminants that's stuck inside clean. And then after that, fingers crossed, it should seal better. Okay, another means of testing your seating of your float valve needle and seat is, rather than a compressor, you can use what I've got here, which is a vacuum gauge. So I use this for like bleeding brakes. So similar sort of process, I'll apply a certain amount of vacuum and this should hold. If it doesn't hold, again, that implies that the needles aren't sealing. So I'll apply a little bit of vacuum, probably to about 5. If it holds, they're good. If it drops, we've got a problem. We need to sort it out. As you can see, can't. It's not holding vacuum either. It's another confirmation that these valve needle seats need some attention. Okay guys, so what I'm going to do to try and clean the float valve seats is I'm going to use some metal polish, in this case Brasso, and also Q-tip. So my plan is to put some brass on the end, and then within there rotate it round until these are all nice and clean. Okay, so hopefully after that's done, so when the float's down it will seal better, but also it will reduce the resistance the float has to overcome when it's going to a low and a higher level, which I suspect being part of the issue as well, because I noticed in the previous test where when the bike was running, I noticed it was missing on the 4th cylinder while it was on the kickstand. And interestingly enough, if I took it off the kickstand and levelled the bike out, that cylinder levelled out, as if that float was stuck, and the motion of me leaning the bike over allowed the float to allow more fuel in. So yeah, I'm going to give these a good clean. See the before and after shots. Ooh. I'll bring you back. Okay, so I've cleaned them with the brasso and the Q-tips, and they are looking much more shiny now, I have to say. And we definitely cleaned them you can tell by the colour of the Q-tips afterwards. See how black they are, how dark they are. So we've definitely done some good there. Whether it'll solve my problem is yet to be determined. So next step is I'm going to put the carburetors back together and put them back on the bike, and then start up and see how she's running. So okay guys, so I've put the carburetors back together, and I thought I will attempt another test without putting them back on the bike. So what I've got here, I've set up the carburetors in a position so that they're level, well, level as if they would be on the bike, and I've hooked up my dummy fuel tank. Okay, so it's currently draining down into the float balls. The idea is it'll fill the float balls, the floats will come up, and it will shut off fuel supply to all 4 carburetors. If it's still got a problem, I should see, like I saw in the previous video, see fuel collecting on the inside of the butterfly valve, or even dripping down here. So I'm going to leave this for some time and see if it holds, and then put it back on the bike. So that should be, if it passes that test, we should be good to go, I think. The only thing that this actually doesn't do is, obviously this bike is a bike with a fuel pump, not gravity fed. So obviously this amount of pressure given here is not really the same as it will be subjected to on the bike. But this is better than nothing. Okay, so it seems to have stopped draining down now. So what I've done, I've topped my tank up. So it's got a nice amount of head on this line, and I've marked the level. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is leave the bike overnight, and if I come back and that level's still gone down, I know for a fact that the float valve needle seats are still passing. So this mimics how the bike would have been sat, and when I saw it flooded. Okay, obviously there's a fuel on the actual bike, there's a fuel petcock in between here which you're supposed to shut, but when we saw it flooded before, I had left it open. Even without that, the float valves in the carburetors should stop fuel flow. Okay, so see how it gets on after a day. Civvy.